So, Be'ez Hashem, we're going to learn a piece of ZOHAR, something in the ZOHAR, this week's Parsha, this week's Torah portion, which is Lecha. And to do this, we'll do it first through understanding a little bit the Peshat, the literal interpretation of the story. And then from the Peshat, we'll go deeper into the ZOHAR and into the Kabbalah. So from the Peshat, from the literal, we'll go into the deeper. As we explained many times, that the Oimek Peshat is the Oimek HaSoid, that the depth of actually understanding the Peshat allows us to understand deeply and to understand what is the Soid, what is the secret, what is actually going on a deeper level. So the question that we're going to discuss is the story of Lecha. We know is the story of Avraham going on a journey. Lecha, he's going on this journey, Lecha, to himself, by himself, with himself, to himself. And in the journey, he also goes with his wife, Sarah, and he also takes along his nephew, which is Sarah's brother, Lot. So to understand a little bit who is Lot, why is he so important to the story, and why does Avram take him along? And at the end, he separates from Avram. So what exactly is the story of Lot? What does he represent? And what is the symbolism and the depth of his character? What's the archetype of his character? Explained many times that the Torah describes events on a pshat level, on a literal level, but they also embody a certain archetype, a certain quality. So what is the quality of Lot? What does Lot represent? And it seems to be almost like in contrast to Avram, or similar to Avram. So what is Lot? So in the ZOHAR, there is a mysterious, very cryptic piece of ZOHAR, part of the ZOHAR in this week's Parsha. So I'll just tell you very quickly what the ZOHAR writes. The ZOHAR is in Sister Torah, page Ayin Tes, 74b, as a part of the ZOHAR within Parshas Lecha. So the ZOHAR says like this: Avram Kutshabrichu Ram Yitzchak Lo B'Avram Yitzchak. Kadosh Baruch Hu Hashem revealed the secrets, or the hidden secrets are revealed through Avram and Yitzchak. Avram da nishmasa lenishmasa. Avram is the soul of the soul. So nishmasa lenishmasa, also in terms of this connection to the 5 levels of soul, that refers to the level of chaya. So Avram represents a very high level of soul. And the Ihi and Sarah nishama dahi Sarah. And the level of neshama, the level of neshama itself, the soul itself, refers to Sarah. So Avram is the soul of the soul, neshama of the neshama, and Sarah refers to the soul. It's interesting because later on, in Parshas Chaisar, the Zohar says that Avram is the soul and Sarah is the guf, is the body. But here it says a little bit differently, that Avram represents the soul of the soul and Sarah represents the soul, neshama. So there's neshama and there's neshama and neshama. Then it continues in saying also that Yitzchak represents Ruach and Rivka represents Nefesh. But we're not going to go into Yitzchak or Rivka. Let's just talk about Avram and Sarah. So Avram is Neshama and Neshama. And Lot Doh Hu Nachash. So Lot represents the Nachash, the snake, the primordial snake. What this represents. We find the snake constantly repeating itself over and over again in the imagery, first in the beginning of the Torah, and then later also in Parshas, in the portion of Noach, we have the idea of the snake, the Nun and the Shin, the dimensions, the 50 and 300, which is part of the dimensions of the Teva. So Lot represents the snake, that's what the Zohar says. Sam / Kel. And this represents the mate of the feminine aspect of the snake, which is the samach mem. This is what the Zohar says. So we have to understand what this means. So in order for us to understand a little bit, so that's what the Zohar says. The Zohar says that there is Avram represents the soul, and the soul of the soul represents the neshama and the neshama, and Lot represents the nachash. Lot represents the snake. So what does this actually mean? And why would Avram travel? Why was Lot a bad? Was embodiment something that's negative? And if it is, why would he travel with him? So let's look at a little bit of the psukim to see what exactly is the story. So the beginning of Lecha starts off like this. Hashem tells Avram that Lech Lecha, that you should go to yourself, go by yourself, with yourself. To the place that I will show you in the future tense. I will show you the world to come, that you'll get to that place. It's always constant. Life is a journey, not about a destination. It's to get to the moment you stop, the moment you feel like you arrived in a destination is the moment you're no longer alive. And then Hashem says, I will make you into a great nation, and I'll bless you. And the idea is that Hashem says, I'll bless you with children, with money, with financial stability, and that you will become a prominent person. Ubishem. Then the Torah says that ve'yehi bracha, and you will go to be a bracha. It means not only are you going to receive blessings, that you'll receive all these blessings that normally in a journey, these things are usually decreased, but you will receive all these things in your life. You'll go for your own benefit and for your own pleasure, which means you'll become something. You're going to go on this heroic journey and you're going to become a great person. And we spoke about this once in the past. Why is it so relevant that everyone becomes wealthy and prominent and a major figure in that time? It's all part of the project of Avram. His mission is to spread monotheism, the oneness of Hashem. But the pasuk says, "V'yehei bracha," you will become a blessing, which means Avram becomes a blessing. The concept of Avram is blessing. Avram represents blessing. Then the Torah says, "V'avarcha mevarchecha," and those who bless you will be blessed. U'mekal lecha ar, and those who curse you will be cursed. Says the Targum, says the Onkelos, says the translation, the original translation of the Torah says that what is umekal lecha, and those who curse you will be cursed. Says the Targum, umelatcha elut. That the translation of curse is umelatcha elut, which is that the translation of cursing in Aramaic is elut. Elut, and the root of the word elut, of course, is light, lut. So we see that the idea of light, which appears immediately in the beginning of the parsha, in its translation, is that light represents curse. So if Avram represents blessing, ve'yeh bracha, Avram represents the world of blessing. He is blessing. Light represents the place of a curse. In the Chazal, the Gemara uses a light, there's a language of light, which means to curse. We have to understand what the idea of a curse is, and what does it mean you are a curse. So light represents a curse. We'll see soon what this means. But then the pasuk continues and says like this: Vayelech Avram kashatibi elav Hashem. Avram actually went and took it at Vayelech itoy Lot, and Lot went with him. So Avram is leaving, and he's going on this journey, and the pasuk says that Lot sort of chooses, this is what it sounds like, he's choosing to go along with, Lot chooses to go with Lot. Lot chooses to go with Avram. Then the pasuk says that Vayikach Avram Asari Ishtay, then Avram takes his wife, that's Lot ben Achiv, and he takes Lot, his nephew, his brother's son. So now, not only is Lot going with Avram, Vayelech ite Lot, that Lot is going with Avram, he connects himself with Avram, but Avram is choosing to take Lot along. Why does Avram take Lot along? I mean, he has many nephews, or he has other family members. Why is he choosing to take Lot, specifically Lot? So this goes back to a previous story. This goes back to the previous thing that we read in the previous parsha. At the end of the previous parsha, it says, the end of Parsha Noach, it says like this: that Haran, who's the father of Lot, Yamas Haran play Terachav. The Haran passes away during the time of his father. He passed away when his father was still alive. And Rashi brings down, this is a Medrash, and the Medrash brings it down, that when Avram was thrown into the fiery furnace with the story of Nimrod, because And so Haran, his brother, was standing there. And the Medrash says that he said in his heart, Haran, who's the brother of Avram, says like this: Im Avram noitzeach ani mishaloi. If he's victorious, then I will be with him. And if Nimrod is noitzeach, and if Nimrod is victorious, then I'll be with him. Kishanisla Avram. Avram was thrown into this fiery furnace, and he survived miraculously. Nasla, that's a miracle happening to survive, and he came out unscathed. Amalei laharan mishal miata. So they asked Haran, and whose side are you on? Are you in the side of idolatry, which is the world of Nimrod? From Nimrod also means to do a moyer, someone that's denying the oneness of Hashem. Are you on that side, or are you on the side of Avram? So what does Haran say? Amal Haran mishal Avramani. I am with Avram. Immediately, they put him through into the fiery furnace, and he was killed. Now, so he says, I am with Avram. So if he's with Avram, it now would make sense why Avram takes light. Why does Avram take light? Because because his father sacrificed his life and says that I am with Avram. He didn't sacrifice his life knowing that he's going to be saved. He sacrificed his life because he saw what happened to Avram, and he was convinced of Avram's conviction of the oneness of Hashem, and he was ready to die in that sword and to sacrifice his life. So Avram has an achrayus. Avram takes responsibility for his nephew who survives that trauma. That's why Avram is sorry. That's why Avram takes Sarah, and also Lot. But why does Lot attach himself? Why does Lot choose to go with Avram? So we'll understand this. So on a simple level, it is obviously this idea because of the events that happened with Har, with his father. So he chooses to connect himself now with Avram, to another father figure, which is his uncle. This is on a pshat level. Now, just incidentally, the Chassam Sofer writes on this that because Haran sacrificed his life, Akidush Hashem, essentially, for the sanctification of Hashem's name, and he says, "Mishal miyata, for who are you?" And he says, "I'm far from." He says that's why all the himois, all the mothers of Klal Yisrael, the matriarchs of Klal Yisrael, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, are all descendants of Haran. Whether it's Sarah, which is a daughter of Haran, or Rivka, a granddaughter, or the daughter of Psulel, or Rachel Leah, which is the daughter of Love and Bas Psul, Bas Haran, which they all come from this family line of Haran. And that's why there was Zohar, the Imais were Zohar because of that. Either way, this is what happens in the beginning of the story, that Lot is going with Avram, and Avram is taking Lot on this journey. Now, the journey begins with a promise. The promise is, you're going to be a blessing, and you'll be blessed. You become a great person. The story continues that Avram, before he goes to Eretz Yisrael, he goes to the land, to the Holy Land, and he builds a mizbeach. Vayikra b'shem Hashem, and he calls the name of Hashem. And Vayikra b'shem Hashem means that he calls the name of Hashem, that he calls for himself, and he calls others to say the name of Hashem. Talked about once about this idea of feeding people and the philosophy of the stomach, the theology of the stomach, through the recognition of how we eat and how the digestive system works, and that's how they come to recognize of the oneness of Hashem. And we see he calls the name of Hashem. Who calls Vayikra b'shem Hashem? And he calls the name of Hashem. Everybody, it's assuming if Avram took his wife and Lot and his entire family and his entire Eshanefesh and all the people that were connected to Avram, he's sort of like a tribal leader. So when it says that he called out Vayikra b'shem Hashem, means that they all called out together. They collectively called out the name of Hashem. That's the story. But then something radical and dramatic happens. That instead of settling in the land, Eretz Yisrael, and the land, and this will be the place where this will be the place of his destiny, immediately the Torah tells us there was a famine in the land. Then Avram then immediately left Mitzrayim. left towards to Mitzrayim. So he goes up to Eretz Yisrael. He goes from Mesopotamia, somewhere near Iraq, and he goes to Eretz Yisrael. And then he goes south and he goes back into Egypt. Why? Because the famine is tremendously difficult. It's a very harsh famine. So it's not just a regular famine. And maybe he would have found provisions to be able to survive, but in Eretz Yisrael, but he recognizes that it's a terrible famine. That it's a terrible famine. He will not survive. And this becomes an aside. This is one of the challenges of Avraham, one of the 10 Nisyonos. What is the Nisayon? So Rashi writes famously that the Nisayon was, if he will think, he will challenge the what Hashem wanted from him. Because now, first Hashem tells Avraham that he should go to Canaan, which means that's the object. The objective is that he should get to Canaan. And now, and now Hashem is creating the context, the situation, because the situation is covered over the Rav is terrible in the land. So obviously that's the will of Hashem that you have to survive, because Avraham he has to survive. So that's the will of Hashem. Now he should leave Eretz Yisrael and go down to Mitzrayim. So he does. So the challenge, the Nisayon was, could he go back to Egypt, even though go down to Egypt, even though he was told to go to Eretz Yisrael, to go to the Holy Land, and he was there for a short long time. And once the famine came so difficult, would he able to go down to Egypt without Mahar Achar Kodesh Baruch Hu, without actually to go down with an equanimity, with a certain settlement? And that was the challenge. That was the Nisayon. Avraham obviously passed this Nisayon. Ramban says a little differently, but this is the way Rashi's reading it. We're going to read it according to Rashi. So he goes down. That's the first Nisayon. When he gets to Egypt, there's another Nisayon. There's another test, another major test. The major test is with Sarah. He sees that he's going down into Egypt, and he says, I see that you're a very beautiful woman. And he says, I'm afraid that they're going to kill me and they're going to take you and do terrible things to you. So he says, maybe say that you're my sister, etc., and things will work out. And that's what actually happens. They take her. They take her. And they capture her. And this is another terrible Nisayon for Avraham, terrible hardship for Avraham. And okay, and the story ends, and they didn't touch her. Eventually, they tried to touch her, didn't touch her, and she comes out also okay. And they go back. Now they're going back to Eretz Yisrael. They're going back to the Negev. They're going back into the south. So they're going back into Eretz Yisrael. So they had this detour. They were going to Eretz Yisrael. They're going to all the land. Then they detoured into Egypt, and they had this hardship because of the famine and the hardship that happened with his wife. Then the pasuk says that they get back into to Beis Kel, Ben Ai, when they get Beis Kel, they get back to Eretz Yisrael. Then the pasuk says like this: he goes back to the original place where he offered an offering. Which remember before he says that he brought an offering, and he built an altar for Hashem. As the pasuk said in 12:8. That he builds, he calls for the name of Hashem. So he goes back to that same Mizbeach, to the same altar. Here, this is Pasuk Daled in Yud Gimel, 13:4. He goes back to the original one. Vayikra Sham Avram b'Shem Hashem. It doesn't say Vayikra Sham b'Shem Hashem, that he calls there the name of Hashem. It says Vayikra Avram. Only Avram. It doesn't mention before, it says Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. They call out the name Hashem, Avram, and everybody. But here it seems to say that only specifically Avram. So again, Vayal Avram Avram and his family and his wife, which are not named, come together, and they're going out to Eretz Yisrael. But Loit Imoy, and Loit is also coming with him. And when the pasuk says V'ikasham Avram, that Avram called out B'Shem Hashem, obviously the pasuk is trying to stress that only Avram calls out, and not Loit. Avram and his entire family, but not Lot. Why not? So it seems that this part of the journey. So Avram's told the journey they'll be blessed. Avram is told that he will receive all these blessings in his life. And he's going to go to Israel. Basically, go Gadol. Lot is on this, is together with Avram. He's ready to go on this journey. But when Lot experiences the hardship of the journey, because it seems to be a Lecha means a going upwards. They're going from Mesopotamia, they're going higher. They're going to Eretz Yisrael, which is an aliyah. They're going to have an aliyah. They're going to have an elevation. And then immediately there was a famine in the land, which means it's a Yerida, and they have to go down by year. Mitzrayim has to go down to Mitzrayim, literally go down to Mitzrayim, but metaphorically also go down into the place of Egypt. That seems to be the opposite of the project, which is Lecha, which is aliyah. So this Nisayan, now of course on a more deeper level, this is explaining Chassidus many times, famously, that the idea is that it's a Yerid Tzarech Aliyah. It's a descent for the purpose of an elevation. But Light doesn't appreciate this, which means a very simple language. Light hears Haran throws himself into the fire, his father, because Avram is saved in this fiery furnace. He survives. Not only does he survive, he's told by the creator of the master of the universe, the creator of the world. There's a vision. And he tells him, you're going to make you for a great nation. You're going to become very rich and very powerful. So part of believing in this, in monotheism, and part of believing in the oneness of Hashem, in the journey of Avraham, is that also he's going to have material wealth. He's going to have spiritual wealth and material wealth. And his life is going to go smooth. It's always going to move upwards. The moment things started getting off track, let's say there was a certain type of lightness and openness and expansiveness or revealed blessings in the beginning of the journey, the moment things started going into the different direction, where it seemed to be a little more opaque, the journey, and it seemed to be harder, that's the moment Lot really checked out. So when Vayikra Avram b'Shem Hashem, when it says that Avram called Hashem b'Shem Hashem, Lot was already internally moving aside from this idea. He was already moving away towards a different space, an inner space. If you look at the Psukim, literally after what it says, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem, then in the pasuk says, "V'gam lo hoylech es Avram," in verse 5. Hey, Yud Hey, 13:5. Gam lo hoylech es Avram hoyat soyin uvakav oyanim. That also Lot, who was going with Avram, he also became wealthy, and he had soyin uvakav. He had different cattle and sheep. V'yahalim, and he had tents, which is a very unusual phrase. The Torah usually describes people with their wealth. It never mentions that they had tents, but here it does say with Lot. And he had tents. And if you look a few verses, a few psukim later, when Lot, this is the time of the process where Lot is separating himself from Avram, where if you go to the right, I go to the left, I go to the right. It says that he goes towards Sdom, and Avram Yashav Eretz Canaan. Avram settles in the land of Canaan. The Lot Yasher Ba'ari Akikar Vayel at Sdom, and Lot settles in the city of Kikar, and he builds tents until Sdom. So it takes the same tents, and the way Rashi describes it, not all at Sdom, which means he didn't move exactly into Sdom, but he put his tents, the tents that he gained, he put them all the way up until the city of Sdom. Now, Sdom is also a place, but also represents an idea, which is the Midas Sdom, the idea of Sdom, which we'll learn Sdom Gemara, the idea of cruelty and selfishness and of a desire, and all these terrible things that we're going to talk later about the story of Sdom, is he's moving towards the direction of Sdom. And the way it's phrased, Mikedem, that he moves away from Mikedem, from the east, the way the Torah, which is not on a geographical level, is incorrect. What the Medrash says, what does it mean he's moving to the east? He says, I don't want anything to do with Avram and not with his God. Okay, in great contrast to his father, Haran, who said, Mishal mi'ataf, who are you? And he said, Mishal Avram, I'm with Avram. Lot now says, I don't have anything to do with Avram and not with his God. What's the dramatic change of heart of Lot? What actually happened so dramatic that Lot decided in the beginning he's going Vayelech itoy, that he's going with him. He decides he's going to connect himself with Avram. Not only Avram is Lot, Avram takes Lot, but he also chooses to go with Lot. Now he's choosing to separate himself. What actually happened? In a way that he's moving Ve'el at Stoim, he's moving towards the direction of Stoim, when eventually he becomes Stoim and he becomes the leader of Stoim, of this city, is that he is disillusioned. Some type of spiritual disillusionment. He had a certain expectation, which is that if I'm going to connect myself with the Lecha Shemayim V'Aretz, if I'm connecting myself with the God of heaven and earth, if I'm connecting myself with the Lecha Avram, with the master of the universe, with the source of all goodness and blessing, what I should receive is blessing and goodness and only good things. Instead, there's famine and there's challenges, this nisyonis. So he moves away. He has a certain perception, a certain idea that if it's good and there's blessings, then I could be attached to Avram. The moment things seem to be that it's a yerida, seem to be that it's a descent, even though it brings to a higher descent, he doesn't understand that yet. He moves aside. Okay, so this is the pshat level. On a pshat level, this is that it's on a very simple pshat level. On a literal level, what we're saying is that Lot had a very immature definition of spirituality, superficial and immature definition of connection to Hashem, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is sort of like a vending machine that I'm going to do good, therefore I'm going to receive revealed good, and the moment he doesn't receive revealed good, he lets go of the whole narrative, of the whole paradigm. So there's a certain level of superficiality here that it's like in a person enters into a relationship and says, the relationship is wonderful and I'm committed so long as it's wonderful and everyone's smiling, everything's happy, and when it gets a little bit rough, I'm out. This is like a level of a superficiality, and this is perhaps also related already, in a negative sense, related to his father, to Haran, which is that Haran has the same idea. When he sees his brother is saved from this story, he says, and throwing into the fire pit, he says, okay, so then I'm with Avram. I see that it works out. It actually did not work out for him. So maybe we could say more like that it was a positive thing that he had Mesiras Nefesh. But either way, this idea of the superficiality or the externality or the very immaturity of spirituality, that's what Lot represents. So Lot is like the curse, or the let's see a second. So let's go back to the ZOHAR. So the ZOHAR says again like this: that Avram is neshama, and then what is the neshama? The soul of the soul. So he says Isar legaber b'yir b'chachmaso. That it awakens within the person yir and chachma. Yir is Hashem, the awe of Hashem. Awe is not fear. It's an atidat ki yir lekimata. Eventually, Avram Hashem at the Akedah says, "Now I know that you're a yir lekim, that you have awe of Hashem." And like the Medrash says, the Yalkut says, and the idea of many Midrashim that yir hanema ba'Avram is ma'ava, that it's a yir part of love. So yir is this awe state. So the Zohar says that Avram represents yira, chachma, wisdom, yira. Sarah nishmasa Sarah bina, and Sarah represents the neshama awakens a person to bina, which is the idea nishmasa Sarah b'tshuva dika. That is the idea of tshuva, return or correction, tikkun. So Avram represents Chachma, wisdom, the idea and the experiential experience of that is bittul, humility, a sense of connection to something that's higher, the recognition that I'm in relationship and dialogue with something that's transcendent of me. And I'm in awe of that experience. That's bittul, chachma, yira. And Sarah is the quality of bina yaseir, which is connected particularly to a woman, a certain type of intuitive understanding of things, and even intellectual understanding of things, left brain, and especially the idea of correction, which is to make things in the correct order. We'll see this later on played out with Sarah in terms of her relationship with Hagar and Yishmael, which she's correcting things. That's the idea of tshuva. She's doing things to correct the order and the structure of things. To Avram, who is the embodiment of Chachma, of Avram. Let's explain the idea of Av is Chachma. His name is Avram, the Chachma that's transcended, Ram is beyond. That's also in his name. His experience of life is that he's in a state of bittul HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He experiences complete humility, and it's not humility that he doesn't exist. On the contrary, Avram was called Avram Oyavoy, and Sefer Kavod Lavid. Like the Rambam writes, the idea is that you do truth because it's truth, and eventually you do receive all the blessings that you receive. But the idea is, the posture is that I am connected to something that's transcendent. So therefore, a person that is told a certain vision and has a certain understanding, and we're all told this vision, we're all told this understanding. We spent this many times about the Lecha, that it's a voice that's been told to everybody. This idea is that we're going to become something. You're going to live your life, and you're going to become something in this world. When you live your life in a way of bittul, that there's a bigger picture here, and I'm connected to something that transcends of me. Even though Hashem tells me I should go this direction, and then 5 minutes later Hashem tells me to go in a different direction. How do I know what Hashem is telling me? Is because I'm sensitive to what life is telling me. Because Hashem is constantly talking to me, and the world is constantly, and Hashem is constantly talking to me through the world that's around me, and I'm in constant dialogue with the creation that's around me. When I'm in dialogue with the creation, I say Hashem wants me to move here, and all of a sudden the situation gets so difficult that it's telling me clearly it's not that it's a Rav Ba'aretz, it's Kavod Ma'od. It's not just a Rav. It's Kavod Ma'od. It's an impossibility that I can survive here. Therefore, Hashem is telling me, okay, so now I have to pivot and do something else. The ability to pivot and to do things differently, to recognize that Hashem is talking to me in different ways. And sometimes Hashem told me to go to Eretz, now we're going to go back into Mitzrayim, or to go to Mitzrayim, is because I have bittul. I'm not stuck. I have something that opens me to something more. Avram is also connected, and it's obviously connected to the idea of light, to or. Like the pasuk says in Yeshaya, Mihir Mizrach, and the Gemara Babasa, as well, and the Gemara speaks about Avram. It says that it's Mihir Mizrach, that Avram represents the light that comes from Mizrach. Here, Pnei Mizrach, the Mishnah says in Yuma, the idea that is the light that's coming from the east. Avram was called the Eson Hazrachi in Tillim. One of the authors of the Tillim is Avram Avinu, and he's called the Eson Hazrachi, the strong one from the east that rise, Ezrach, Zricha. That means the idea of light that's shining. Light, on the contrary, and the opposite. Light is, we said, his idea of klala. And in the pasuk it says A'or. A'or means like extreme light, or such extreme light that it almost seems like the opposite of light, which is the idea of darkness. That's what light, also in psukim, the word light comes from the word chayshech, comes from the idea of darkness and astara. We find this in the book of Rus, for example, where it says it says that Rus came in the middle of the night in the time of darkness, and she sat and she lied down. So the idea of light, in contrast to the idea of Avram, is this concept of darkness, the opposite of light. So Avram represents light, and light represents the opposite of light, which means that Avram recognizes Avram has faith, so has bittul, has faith, and is connected to Hakadosh Baruch Hu always, both in a place of light and also in a place of darkness. And light only experiences. Light is the there's two ways that I think about darkness. Is darkness a creation? It's a creation, or darkness is just the absence of light, which means that darkness doesn't have an inherent value. Darkness is just the shadow side of light, or the opposite side of light. To say a little differently to understand this, when the ZOHAR says that light represents the nachash, what's the nachash? What's the snake? So explained many times that the idea of the snake, the Sephora writes in Bereshis, the idea of the snake is koyachadimi, the power of imagination, the world of fantasy. That fantasy on its own, when it's not connected to a truth, to a real thing, to something that's real, represents the world of no substance, just imagination. It's not real. It's not a real thing. However, fantasy, the power of imagination, which is not fantasy. The opposite of fantasy is a skin deep. That's why it's connected to skin, and connected to the snake, which sheds its skin. And this skin is connected to the Koyach Madama. The idea of the Ari says that there's different levels of there's flesh, and there's bones and the sinews. And then there's the skin. So the skin is like the most superficial part of the physical body, which represents like the overlay of something that's deeper. There's something that's deeper. And then there's this, the skin is the most outer layer. So when it says that Avram took light and took him on a journey, which means he took the snake. That's really what the Torah is saying, according to the ZOHAR. He took the snake. What does it mean he took the snake? He took the Koyach HaMadam, he took this power of imagination. That in Kedusha, in the holiness, which is Avram, Chachma Bina. So you have Chachma Bina, you have the levels of intelligence. Neshama. So these are different levels of intelligence. Chachma Bina Das, his level of intelligence. And the fourth layer of intelligence is the Koyach HaMadam, is the power of imagination. The power of imagination, when it's used and it's harnessed in a place of Kedusha, when it's used for a positive thing, which means when a person has a certain understanding of how the world works, and has a proper understanding, has a proper chachma, a proper bina of understanding how the world works, and then they use the koyach habadama to allow themselves to imagine that reality developing into fruition, to imagine your life developing into the certain way of what you understand as kedusha. Then you're in the language of the Rambam, the power of imagination is like koyach habadama is like a horse. So either you're riding the horse, which is a positive development, which means you're harnessing the power of your imagination to articulate and to help you evolve in certain processes of spiritual development, and mental development, and emotional development, and you're using it in a positive context, or it's just skin deep, which means that the horse is riding you. You're impressed from the external world, so either it's generated from the inside out, or it's generated from the outside in, and that's skin deep. So the transformation of the koyach madama, of the koyach of the nachash, of the snake, is that it becomes a choshen, it's the same letters, or becomes the ois of Mashiach, the same numeric value, which is that idea that it becomes the source of divination, the source of Ruach HaKodesh, the source of Mashiach, the source of redemption. That's part of the redemptive state. On the other hand, if you just have the imagination, so the moment, to say it a little differently, the moment light separates from Avram, so it says, Achri part light calls man sharashi imoy hoyadibu parish menu. The pasuk says in 14, chapter 13, pasuk Yudal 14, Hashem Amar al Avram Achri part light imoy. Hashem spoke to Avram after light separated from him. So Rashi brings down this. It's a medrash. Calls man sharashi imoy hoyadibu parish menu. So long as light was with him, Hashem didn't speak to him. Which dibur nevuah, It's through koyach madama. That the vur comes through the power of this higher developed power of imagination. When Lot is now separating himself from Avram, and he says, I don't want not Avram and not his God. I don't want to be connected to Avram and to his God. Then the power of imagination separates itself from Chachma Bina, separates itself from the level of intelligence. It becomes an independent thing, and then it's superficial, then it becomes actually only a snake. And then it's impossible to use the Koyach HaMadama, to use this power of imagination to have a Ruach HaKodesh. So it has to be Achli Paradime. Then it has to be a different type of integration of another Koyach HaMadama, which is that the world of fantasy, the world, it's a world of absence. It has no substance. There's no substance to it. It's only as real as its connection to something that is true, and it has no. It's when it's an independent thing. When it separates itself from Chachma Bina, when it separates and it becomes an independent thing, it's a superficiality, and it's empty of anything that's true. This is what happens to light. To say it in a much simple, I'm trying to say a much simple level, that we said in the Psukim that what happens with light is that he's going in for the spiritual ride, and when things are good, the moment things get a little difficult, and the moment is nisyonis, he's already wants to separate. That's on a literal level. On the metaphysical level, what's happening is that Avram represents Chachma, Sarah represents Bina. So Chachma Bina is the level of intelligence, which is the correct understanding of being weighed in this world. Avram integrates this level of light with him, the power of imagination, the koyach of the nachash, the koyach of the snake, to transform that snake into something that's positive. But the nachash itself is the world of superficiality. But Avram is integrating the world of superficiality of the world of imagination into a higher context, connecting it to be the oil on top of the basar, to be the skin on top of the flesh, so to be connected. But the light is separating himself from Avram already, right with the nisyonis, right when they're having these challenges. Light is separating himself from this because light is not in for the depth of the experience. Light is living on the superficiality of the experience, and the superficiality of the experience, it's only when things are good it's good, and therefore are connected. The moment it's not so good, the moment there's an assign, the moment there's a test, I'm out of there. This is what light represents: the movement away from HaKadosh Baruch, the movement away from truth, the movement away from something that's holy and transcendent. The moment things get tough, because if you're living in a level of your spirituality is just superficiality, it's just what could I gain out of these experiences. The moment it gets a little bit tougher, and I have to be more committed, I have to be more vested in there. The moment I need basar, I need actually flesh I need to put my flesh in the game, so to speak. I need to really be invested into the experience. I'm out. I don't want to have anything to do with that. So light starts separating himself already once these experiences are happening, which means that there's a severing of the world of imagination from the substance of the basar of a Chachma Bina of Avram, and therefore it just becomes empty and has no substance, and becomes the absence of light. This is the darkness. So to say it in a very simple level, in terms of our own life, what this actually means is that there's two paradigms here that Torah is telling us. There's two ways of experiencing our relationship with Hashem, our deeper relationship with Torah mitzvahs, our deeper relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How do we have these deeper relationships? And then it translates into all types of relationships, a relationship with our spouse, a relationship with our children. How do we enter into relationships? Are we entering into it from a place of depth, from a place of substance, a place of chachma, a place of bina, a place of bittul, a place of tshuva, a place of understanding, a place of wisdom, and a place of trying to correct things, and a place of awe, and we're entering into those experiences correctly, then even if things get a little bit more complicated and difficult, we recognize that there's a vision, and the arc of our lives is on Hagas HaYichud. There's ultimately things will get to its correct form. And ultimately, there will be a redemption, and the Mashiach will eventually reveal itself, and will enter into a redemptive state. So I know that that's the movement. There's the Lech, even though Zirida, even though sometimes I feel like life is getting down, but I know ultimately it's always going to a higher place. I just need a consciousness and an awareness to allow me to experience that and be connected, to have that amunah, to have that trust, that faith. And I always remain connected. And then if I do that correctly, then there's going to be Vashem Amar Alavran. There'll be another revealing, and another revealing, and another revealing. It'll be, and we're going to have deeper experiences. Or are we living on the level of superficiality? And this is what light is. Are you impressed with what you see in the external? You see this would happen to Avram, and oh, he's blessed with goodness. And this is what happens. If this is the way you live, you're going to be blessed with family, and you're blessed with wealth. And it's a nice way to live. And therefore, I'm attracted to that. And the moment I'm experiencing any type of difficulty, I just leave. Then you're just living as a shadow. You're living in a place of dark. You're really in the place of the absence of life, the absence of blessing. You're essentially a curse. You're cut off from life. And then the result of that is, or maybe a manifestation of that idea is pure selfishness. You're just trying to think about your own personal gain from these experiences. And if you're not seeing the gain in these experiences, even though there is on a deeper level, but you don't yet see it, you don't have the vision to see it. You're just being in the immediate, and you can't see anything. Then you leave. And it's interesting that it's what actually happens with the children of light. That which is Ammon and Moav, that the father of the nations of Ammon and Moav, the pasuk says, "Lo yave Ammoni v'lo b'chol Hashem," that eventually no one from Ammoni Moavi should not come, the males. Not Moavis, of course, that's Rus, etc. And Amma. But the why? Asher loy ikducha belechem ubemayim says Mitzrayim. Why? Because they didn't give you any bread or water when you left Egypt. The Maral, and that's Yisrael writes, chapter 32, the Maral writes that there's no nation that represents the opposite of a Klal Yisrael like Ammon and Moav. Because if Klal Yisrael is Achmanim Vaishanim Gevel Chasadim, the definition of Klal Yisrael, not even because of their neshama, just an innate, natural thing is that they're Achmanim Gevel Chasadim, Vaishanim. They're humble. They're bashful, and they have compassion, and they're kind, and they're giving. The opposite of that is completely selfish. Like they didn't want to give anything to anybody, even though it doesn't come at their expense. And this is the end result of superficial spirituality. So to sum it up is that there are two paradigms there, and this is what the Torah is telling you. There's a Mevarecha and there's a Zohar. And Or actually comes from the word light. It's an intense light that becomes actually darkness. There's a way of ruchnius, a way of being in this world, which is like Avram, which is that you're committed to a path, committed to your life, committed to your family, committed to your community. And there's this deep commitment on you because you understand why you're here. You have the wisdom then that gives you understanding of what's your journey. And then you use your power of imagination to help you unfold and to develop some type of small level of Ruach HaKodesh or some type of intuition of how you're supposed to do things in your life and how you're supposed to unfold on a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual level your own life. And you're in there for the long run because you know that it's a process. And you know that every year there's a tzarech. And every time a person descends, and Hashem is changing paths. Hashem says, I should live here now. Hashem says, I should live there. Hashem says, do this job now. Hashem tells me I should do another job because it's covered arav ma'od, because it's impossible for me to survive. So obviously Hashem is telling me, the world is telling me through Hashem. Hashem is telling me through the world, which is the way Hashem talks to us, as in dialogue with us constantly. It's through the world that we should change paths. And have bittul, have humility. I recognize, okay, this is what Hashem's will is. And sometimes it's going to work out beautifully. And I hope everything is always going to be beautiful. And we should hope and pray that it should be continues this way, and for everybody, b'chalal b'frat, generally and specifically. And if it sometimes doesn't work exactly as you feel, but you know there's a kavanah, there's going to be a but then it's going to be aliyah. It's going to be for the purpose of ascent, and you're connected. You're always connected to that, or you're living in a place of fantasy, in a place of superficiality, the place of the shadow side, of the dark side, which is I just want spirituality. I just want ruchnius as much as it feeds my ego. When it works, it works. When the moment it stops working, I'm out of there. And that's the difference between you. That's what happens with light. So even though Avram wants to take light, he wants to take the nachash, which represents this idea of the superficiality of ruchnius, the superficiality of intelligence, the idea of the koyach hadimi, the power of imagination. He wants to integrate that because he wants to take that, and we should take everything. We should take all the powers in the world and avodas Hashem to serve Hashem. That force itself, which is embodiment and the quality of light, is still, the Torah says, represents pure superficiality and doesn't desire to be connected to something that's real and true and holy at all times. I know this is a little different than we do every week about the ZOHAR, but this is a little the Peshat. It's similar to what we've done in the past, where Be'ez Hashem, maybe one day we'll get back to it. We'll do an in-depth analysis of every parsha to explain how Peshat and Pesach, the entire parsha, and Be'ez Hashem one day to maybe put into all this form. All right. Have a Lech Shabbos.